Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly and I'm joined as always by my co-host. His name is Matt Freeman, but we just call him the Geek. How's it going today, Geek?
It's going really good, boss. This is the temporary position though, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Am I going to get... I've been concerned because I've seen you've been hiring a lot of people in above me, and I thought that I would be promoted from this position.
Just eat the chicken and go away.
Yes, sir.
This week on the podcast, it is another one of our Deconstructing Addendum series, where we're taking a look at the newest films from directors that we've covered in the past. This time, we are catching up with director Guillermo del Toro and talking about his newest film. It came out just this past December. You might not have even heard of it, but it's a movie called Nightmare Alley. So we're going to be doing a full spoilers review of Nightmare Alley. I think we both have lots to say about this movie, Matt. This is another one of those episodes where we haven't done a lot of talking about the movie beforehand, so I have no idea what you think about this movie, and vice versa.
That's correct.
After we finish up with Nightmare Alley, we are going to circle back around to our canon episode from last month. The results for the Grand Budapest Hotel are in, and we're going to read them. And then, Matt, I wanted to finish the episode this week talking about the Academy Awards briefly, because the nominations for the Oscars came out this past Tuesday, and I don't want to get into detail about the nominations. I just want to talk broadly about the Oscars and what they mean in 2020, if 2021. 2022, Jesus, if anything.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So that's the episode.
All right.
Matt, let's talk about Nightmare Alley.
What year are we in?
1941.
What day is today?
Wednesday, I think.
Very well. As briefly as you can. Can you read minds?
Seeing you.
Come on in and behold the mysteries of the universe.
In all your familiar places.
I want to give you the world and everything in it.
What are you talking about?
We got a little mind reading show.
There's a woman, Abigail.
Oh, God.
Teach me.
Teach you. Everybody has some shadow from their past.
What is this movie all about?
An ambitious carny with the talent for manipulating people with a few well-chosen words hooks up with a female psychiatrist who is even more dangerous than he is.
So it was directed by Guillermo del Toro, written by del Toro and Kim Morgan, and is based off the 1947 movie of the same name, which itself was an adaptation of the Lindsay Gresham novel, also of the same name, that came out in 1946. It stars a whole bunch of really amazing people: Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, Richard Jenkins, Rooney Mara, Ron Perlman, of course. Mary Steenburgen shows up for 30 seconds and shoots herself in the eye.
Yep.
Matt, what did you think of Nightmare Alley?
Well, I didn't love it. We're going to do our ranking toward the end, probably. Or are we not? Well,
when we did Del Toro last time, we did a ranking when we finished with Del Toro.
Maybe we could figure out where this goes in the ranking, but it's especially surprising given all the great actors. I have a lot of specific complaints. This is one of those viewing experiences, though, where if I have to be honest, so if I see a movie and I'm feeling ill, then I will dislike the movie because I'm feeling ill, which is unfair, you know? Mm-hmm. So that might be what's happening a little bit here, just being honest. But I still think that my complaints are valid, and we'll get into those as we go, I think. But that's right now I'm sort of displeased by the movie overall. What did you think? Please tell me you loved it so that you can lift me out of this pit.
Well, Matt, to answer that question, let me give you a list of things that I really love, and you'll see if you can tell how I felt about this movie based on these things.
Okay.
So I really love film noir. I really love Guillermo del Toro. I really love con artist films, and I really, really love Cate Blanchett. So how do you think I felt about this movie?
I think probably fairly positive.
I loved this movie. Okay. I love this movie so much. It has everything I love about Guillermo del Toro, but also he's doing new things. I mean, he's still destroying faces. We'll get into that, but I think one of the most fascinating things when I heard about this movie was I was like, why is Del Toro making this movie? It doesn't necessarily seem like the type of thing Del Toro would get into, but I think his sensibility works perfectly for what this movie is trying to do. I think overall it might be a little bit long. 2.5 hours is, I think, 40 minutes longer than the 1947 version. And I don't know if the movie needs to be that long, but that's not like a complaint. Like I was sitting here like, oh, when the movie going to end? That's 2.5 hours a long time to be in this terrible, awful, depressing world.
Yeah, I mean, just to react to that specific statement, when I was like 30 minutes into the movie, I was like, wow, this is kind of slow. How much more is there? And I looked at the time bar and there was over 2 hours left. And I went, oh. So that's how I felt about the length. Just to bounce back at you.
I mean, it definitely is slow. I mean, the first hour of the movie is our main character, played by Bradley Cooper, named Stanton Carlisle, at a carnival and learning the ways of the carny lifestyle. That is the first hour of the movie, and then the movie shifts from there into, arguably what the plot is from there. Like the summary here, the IMDb summary that you read is the second 90 minutes of the movie.
Right.
But I will say that the first hour certainly does matter. I mean, I think the writing of this movie and the structuring of this movie, and maybe this comes directly from the novel, I haven't read it, but I think is very clever in the way everything in that first hour is set up to pay off in some really interesting way in the last 90 minutes of the movie, including the wonderful twist ending that I laughed out loud when I saw what was happening. When Bradley Cooper becomes the geek in the in the carnival show. I like, that's why I think structurally this is really, really good. And that's been a complaint I've had with Del Toro in the past. And then of course the production design is just incredible. I almost was sad when we left the carnival behind, because I think like the way he designed the sets and like the look and the feel of the carnival, I was just so into, and I just didn't want to leave that place. But then like, do we know what city they're in? Is it New York City that they're in?
I have no idea. It didn't feel like New York City in the 1930s. It felt like a smaller city, but I don't actually,
Sure.
I wasn't in New York City in the 1930s. So
You weren't?
maybe
What were
I'm
you
wrong.
doing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree completely. Actually, my favorite part of the movie, in terms of just purely enjoying the time, was the first half, was the time in the carnival. All the characters are much more interesting, and I think a lot of my favorite moments have to do with like him learning the mentalism and these these really dramatic sort of demonstrations of mentalism.
Sure.
The one actor who's his mentor in teaching him mentalism, I forget who that is, but that was a great performance. I really liked all of that stuff. I was disappointed when we moved away from that, and then as you say, in the end, it's like, oh, that was Act 1. Like that wasn't even yeah. So that was that is what I really did like about the movie, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that I love about the carnival stuff so much is it's this very interesting dynamic going on here, because we have this group of people that obviously cares deeply about each other, right? Like they're a family in many ways, but that's not entirely true, because then you have the geek who is like being horribly abused by these people, right? Like there's this really innate closeness between the Pete character, who's the guy that mentored him, and his wife, played by Toni Collette, Xena. And then of course the Molly character, played by Rooney Mara, and then the Ron Perlman character. Like all these people like are very close and obviously care about each other very much. And it's this really interesting, like I think this movie is saying a lot through the way the carny people interact with each other, and then also the way people interact with each other in the outside world. I think there is something this movie is saying about the idea of truth and like truth and deception, and how damaging, how important the truth is, and how damaging deception can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about Rooney Mara and what her show was, which was not like her show in the carnival was, she was running electric current through her. It was not necessarily deception, right? It was fantastical, and it looked more dangerous than it was, right? It looked like she was going to die at any moment, but she was relatively safe. And then Bradley Cooper comes in, and what does he do? He takes her, very simple, like, isn't this amazing, this thing I'm doing? And he layers deception and lies on top of it. Now, it's not enough that we have current running through her and we can be wowed by it, but now we're going to fake her execution, and we're going to do this whole big so-and-so about it. And it's just layering deception on top of truth and honesty. And that is ultimately incredibly destructive.
Yeah. I think there's tons of that running all throughout the movie. I mean, the element of the geek, I think, is, sort of central to the theme.
Yeah.
Where we have this guy who, in a sense, is our protagonist. And he is just a guy who's had bad luck in his life. And then this guy literally manipulates him by drugging him and stringing him along until he's like inhuman, basically. And they kind of just like use him up until he's dead. And
then they get a new one. Yep.
Yeah. Then they get a new one, and it's horrible. It's psychopathic. And it's interesting because, I thought it was really interesting the way Bradley Cooper's character reacts to Willem Dafoe telling him that story. Because first of all, it's interesting that Willem Dafoe is almost like proud of himself because of like, hey, look what a good job I did, like ruining this guy's life and manipulating him. Aren't I clever? And Bradley Cooper is like, oh, that poor soul. But he doesn't get angry. He doesn't condemn Willem Dafoe, or storm away from the table, or anything like that. He feels human empathy, but he does nothing about it.
Yeah.
And then he just continues to live the life that he lives, which then damns him.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think there's so much going on with this character here. And I think at times he's almost too sympathetic, considering the fact that he is, by the end of the movie, a total monster that destroys everyone's lives that he touches. But I think there's a lot there with, we learn that his father was an alcoholic that abused him, and we see at the end of the movie, like, I love the opening of the movie, by the way. Like, I don't think Bradley Cooper says a line of dialogue for the first 15 minutes of the movie. He's just like this silent guy that we're just like watching as he watches things. And the movie opens with him dragging a body under the floorboards of a house and then setting the house on fire and walking out of it. So you're immediately like, what the fuck is going on here? Did he murder this guy? What's happening? And we learn by the end of the movie that he didn't directly murder him, but this was his father, and he opened a window and took his blanket and watched him die. And that is very similar to what they're doing to the geek, right? Like, you are not directly killing a person, but you are taking away every resource they have and then watching them kill themselves. And I think the reason he doesn't get angry and righteous about this person is because I think he on some level is disgusted by the idea of an alcoholic because it relates to his father. And then, of course, as the movie carries on, relates directly to himself as well. But he's disgusted and ashamed by that thing. And so, yes, he sees this person as a person because he starts the movie with a certain level of empathy. He also like sees, well, he probably sees him a little bit like his father as well. And that's part of his inaction there.
Yeah. And he becomes self-hating as the movie goes on, and as he indulges more in his manipulations and lies, he becomes more and more self-hating. And then there's kind of a threshold crossed when he finally begins to drink alcohol. And I think symbolically what that means is he hates himself. He's so disappointed in himself. Now he's actively trying to undermine himself. He's like, well, I guess I might as well drink because I'm a piece of shit anyway, is kind of the vibe that you get at that point in the story.
Well, and it's like, it's so fascinating because his father had a problem with alcohol, died. He finds this father figure in the Pete character who has a problem with alcohol, and dies because Bradley Cooper fucks up and gives him wood alcohol instead of the right bottle. I don't know about you, but like the first time we see that with Willem Dafoe says, like, here's the two bottles, don't mix them up. You're like, okay, well, 100% going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Maybe don't store them right next to each other in identical bottles.
It seems like a good idea. Yes.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, he's got the layered guilt on about, his hatred of his father, but his act in murdering his father. And then you layer on top of this, he finds a new father figure and then murders him as well. And he's constantly running from that. And I think, I will say, I think Bradley Cooper is probably a little too old for this character. I feel like this was supposed to be someone much younger. And like everyone like keeps calling him like young man and like referring to his youth. And Bradley Cooper's in his 40s now, which because I'm rapidly approaching my 40s, I'm going to go ahead and say that's not that old. But I feel like this is supposed to be a kid in their 20s or something. Fresh starting out their life, and watching them kind of collapse from there.
Yeah, it only really makes sense if we view it that way. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's like, okay, but what has he been doing for the last 30 or 40 years?
Yeah.
If he's only now, starting his life as a carny. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really work. I didn't. It's funny. I don't have a problem with Bradley Cooper as an actor. I think some people don't think he's a good actor. I've never really minded him, but this was actually a role where I was just like, I'm just aware that this is Bradley Cooper the whole time. He's not really disappearing into the role for me. I'm just like, I'm just too conscious of, that's Bradley Cooper.
I think part of that is probably like when you're across from Cate Blanchett, who's one of the best actresses ever, like you just kind of dwindle in her light, her Galadriel light, I think I liked Bradley Cooper a lot more than you did here. I understand what you're saying. I think his performance is a little stilted, but I think that part of that is the character. I think this is such a reserved character. Like you don't really get any idea about who he is in the first hour. Like when he's at the carnival, we don't really have any idea who he is. It's like he's refusing to let us into him. And I think Cooper's playing that beautifully, where he doesn't talk very much. When he does, he talks kind of very monotone and flat. He has a little bit of an accent. And then I love that in the 2 years later portion, you can see he's trying to hide that accent a little bit because he's ashamed of it. I think a lot of what he's doing here is under the surface. And so, I can see what you mean. Bradley Cooper is such a good looking dude, and the movie acknowledges that, right? It's like we'll help you out. You're good looking. That I understand how that can kind of overpower what's happening, especially as he descends. He's still like, oh, this guy is lost and going insane, but he's pretty good looking still,
right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, again, it wasn't horrible, didn't ruin the movie or anything, but it's just. I think that's the problem with the leading man. Like leading man energy is opposed to character actor energy in some actors.
Yeah.
And then some big stars can subsume themselves into a character. Like Tom Cruise famously has a couple roles here and there where it's like, holy crap, that's Tom Cruise. But most of the time he's just being Tom Cruise. I don't know, like you said, it's when you contrast it against like Toni Collette, for example, who's just the best ever. Like when he walks into the room and into their like apartment, when the carnies are visiting them after not seeing them for a while, and he goes like, "How long are you staying?" And then like just her facial reaction is like the most perfect piece of acting I've ever seen in my life. Like that. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that I wish he would do, because as you say, it's like a character who's reserved is going to need to emote in all these little small, flashes of expression that they then hide and so forth. And
but don't you think part of his whole routine is that his face and his actions and his expressions and his reactions are so rehearsed and so calculated that, he won't even betray anything for our sake.
Maybe. Yeah. I totally get what you mean. I can't, it's hard for me to think of any instance in film where that has actually worked for me though. Like,
sure,
you know what I mean?
Fair.
Like the idea of like, well, the point is that the character is super stoic. And I'm like, I get it. I know the point is the character is super stoic, but I need something to latch onto. So I don't know, maybe I just don't like that kind of character. There's another thing I wanted to bring up, and I think this is a good time for it, which is my other like big complaint about the movie. Here's the weird thing is I don't know if this is just like a weird idiosyncratic pet peeve of mine, and I'm the only person in the world who thinks this, or if other people might agree with me. But I do not like this thing that late Del Toro is doing, where the camera is constantly moving, even if it's just two people in a scene talking, and it's almost like shot reverse shot, but he's just the camera. It's you can't see me because it's a podcast, but it's like the cameraman is like swaying randomly, right, left, up, down, constant movement. Even if the actor is holding perfectly still, there's nothing about the scene that sort of requires this movement. It's not like it's even a dynamic thing. It's not like an interestingly dynamic thing. It's just constant moving. And it like did something to my brain where I like was having trouble just like literally visually locking on to the actors' faces. And so the reason I bring it up in this context is I'm like, I don't know, maybe he was acting perfectly fine. Maybe it was a great performance, but like the extra effort. Like there's a reason why in film normally if you have a dramatic moment, you do a close up, or you do a steady shot on the actor, and you just let the performance be the star of the show. You let the performance just breathe and dominate, and let it soak into your eyeballs. When the camera is just constantly moving for no goddamn reason all the time, the entire movie, I can't. I like it. It's like 80. I'm getting like 80% of the signal, and 20% of the signal is like fuzzing off into static. You know what I mean?
First of all, I think, you say late stage Del Toro, he's been doing this from the very beginning. Like if you go back and look at his earlier stuff, he does really like this kind of, and when you're talking about movement, it's not quick movement. It's like he does this kind of slow pan. It's like this very kind of slow, but you're right. The scene, the camera is moving constantly. He doesn't like a static camera. I don't agree with you here. But I will say that like you texted, like the only thing we talked about this movie before we got on the podcast was you dealing with that while you were watching it. And I went and turned the movie on to be curious. And like, once you notice it, I do agree that it like, if you're focused on it, it takes over everything and you can't stop seeing it, to where all you're seeing is, oh, yep, the camera's moving, just slowly moving to the right here and slowly moving to the left here. I think you're totally right. I will say in my entire first viewing experience of this movie, I didn't consciously notice that was happening one time. And I mean, I think the movie is absolutely stuffed with scenes where you're right up in a character's face. I mean, I just like, there's images in my head of like these super close on Cate Blanchett as we're seeing her kind of make a calculation and decide how much she's going to fuck over this guy or not. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that once you notice it, it's going to bother you forever. I think that's totally true. And I think that's exactly what happened to you, where at one point you're like, something's wrong here. And then, wait, the camera's moving. And then as soon as that switch is flipped, you're fucked.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. It did not bother me in the slightest. And I do love, like, to me, the effect that produces when you're not paying attention to it, specifically, but the broader effect is this kind of, we talked about it, I think, in Pan's Labyrinth specifically because it felt fairy tale-y, where the camera is just kind of floating magically through the world a little bit. And it doesn't really stop. It's just like constantly kind of exploring the scene. And like, to me, it's kind of like if you're in the room with these two characters and you're watching these two characters go at it and go at it with this manipulation game where you, the audience, realizes that they're both manipulating each other. It's kind of like you're walking around them and studying them and trying to see if you can see something else going on from a different angle. That's the kind of effect that I think it produced in me. I all that being said, I totally get why this happened to you, because like I watched 15 minutes of this movie with what you said in my head and I could not stop noticing it.
Yeah, that's the thing about stylistic choices, is sometimes they become grating. And like I think this, I remember this becoming a bit like, because Del Toro, he's an artiste. He's very mannered in a lot of ways, right? And by the end of our Deconstructing Del Toro series, all of his little mannerisms stopped being endearing to me and started actually taking me out of the movie, because I'm like, yep, face smash count number 1, and I would just, it really actually made it hard for me to enjoy the movies, because I was just like, yep, this is, I can see the stylistic fingerprints all over everything, which is, again, it's like, I'm not even saying, oh, I hate this. I'm just saying, like, well, I'm noticing it so much that it's distracting.
Sure.
And that's what was happening with the moving camera here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's an opinion thing. It's a taste thing, right? I'm not saying, I'm not even saying he shouldn't have done it. It's just like, it drove me crazy. So
no, I totally get that. And I'm with you on this, because I think when Bradley Cooper punched a man in the face so hard that his nose collapsed into his face, like, I laughed out loud because I knew for a fact that this was one of the things that you pointed out that is fundamentally true, that in every single Guillermo del Toro movie, someone's face gets horribly brutalized in some way or another. Like, even Mary Steinbergen, when she shoots herself in the eye. Who does it that way? No one would ever shoot themselves that way. And I think it's really fascinating, this preoccupation he has, and I wonder, he's conscious of it, right? That he's like I like to destroy the face, because the face is I just like
the window to the soul. And I mean, also just like people are very sensitive about it. It never fails to have an effect of making people go like, oh, I mean, for example, not only does he punch the guy's face in, but when he runs over the guard, the bodyguard, he hits him once, and you're like, you have your normal human reaction when you're watching an action movie, which is like, he's probably dead, not really feeling anything about it, because I'm totally desensitized, or so I thought, until he hits him again and like mangles his body, and you see his like face and skull is all fucked up. And then I was like, oh God, and so it's like, he just knows that as desensitized as we are, you can still get to people by messing with the face.
Yeah. My wife says, I don't remember Guillermo del Toro being this violent. And I was like, oh no, trust me. He is. He is. I can't wait to see how violent the stop motion Pinocchio is. I wonder if Pinocchio is going to get his wooden nose like fucking destroyed.
Yeah. Somebody's going to just take an axe to his wooden face. It's There were I don't remember any bugs.
No, not really. No bugs. I mean, there were a lot of watches, but not a lot of specific clockwork stuff going on here. I just like right now, every time we talk about a Del Toro movie, like my thing to do while we're doing it is I just type the name of the movie into Google and put Google image search on, and just like walk through the beautiful scenes of this movie. And I want to say, like, this is an incredible looking movie. Like I just like the costuming and the design, the look of the characters. Like it is taking the favorite parts of noir and like putting a Del Toro twist on them in a way that I just fucking love, man. I could look at stills from this movie all day. I think it's so good.
Yeah, I agree. The color, like the color palette, the color grading mostly works really well for me. There were a few nighttime shots when the color grading seemed unreal, like it was like, that's not real. But any sort of like the carny stuff and the high class stuff, just the color, the set design, the shots, the costuming, just just visually gorgeous. I agree with that totally.
Yeah, like Bradley Cooper might not have been the best actor to play this role, but when I look here of an image of him in his fedora with a cigarette coming out of the side of his mouth, I'm like, oh, you did it. That's noir right there. That is perfect noir with his little pencil mustache. It's just everything about it just fucking works on me. And then Cate Blanchett, it being the femme fatale, like it's just everything. I questioned at the beginning when I first heard about this movie why Del Toro wanted to do this thing, and it's like, oh, he wanted to fuck around in noir, and I think he succeeded wonderfully. Like, even complaints about the movie aside, what have you, I think the look of this thing is just remarkable.
Yeah, I can't complain about that at all. Even it's funny. I just did what you suggested, which is just to go look at stills and just like I'm just looking at relatively inconsequential set pieces like this apartment that they live in before they really hit it big, and it's like just like every molecule of that is period perfect, and just the colors. It's just really striking.
Yeah. Well, and the Kate Blanchett's office, the psychiatrist's office, and like how many like sliding doors and things there are, like there's so many doors and secret areas and safes, and it's just like this wonderful construction of bad, like it's just the movie's so great in that like you see him start to really be interested in this woman, and the whole time you're just like, no, she's clearly manipulating you. Like she has a fucking recorder in her office. There's no way you're not being recorded right now. And yet he's so desperate to like have someone to talk to about these things that he can't help it.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing about the movie is like you can. I didn't know the plot going into it, but pretty quickly you understand like, oh, okay, this is going to be one of those Del Toro stories that's about sort of a guy who is damned by fate, which we haven't talked about that as like a theme of Del Toro as far as I remember, but he does tend to have movies where an important element is like Crimson Peak comes to mind, Pan's Labyrinth comes to mind, where it's ultimately a tragedy, and it's like, the character is doomed from the beginning, and you're just watching them play out their doom. Which can be just depressing to have to sit through.
It's interesting. Like I agree, doomed by fate, but I think this character is also doomed by himself. Like I do think there are just plenty of moments in this movie where this character could have gotten out of it, could have called it off, but he just keeps going and keeps pushing. There's even that moment where like Molly tries to just be like, fuck this, I'm out. And like, I've never been more disappointed to see her at the bus stop, And again, this is another great production design detail, because they're at the bus stop. It is gray. Everyone's wearing gray. Everything is flat and then like she's there in this like bright red dress and hat, like just and you see her from behind, and like in any other movie there would be that moment where you go, are they going to do the thing where he like turns her around and it's not her, it's just someone else that looks like her, and it's like, gotcha, are they going to do that moment? But in this movie you just know immediately from behind, oh, that's her. And then you're just like, oh fuck, now she, like I was convinced what was going to happen is she was fucked, she was going to die, that they were going to try to do this thing where they were trying to fool the Richard Jenkins character to believe that this is his lost lover, and he was going to figure out that it wasn't her, and he was going to flip and just kill her. And especially as we move into that scene where he's like, cleansing himself of his sins, which are that he's been presumably murdering young women like his entire life. And like you're just like, oh my god, oh fuck, what have you done, Bradley Cooper? What have you fucking done? I think like that's the thing about this movie that really really worked on me, was that the tension of this whole last 30 minutes or so of the movie as we're leading to this moment that is going to be a disaster, just really really worked on me. Even the little bits, like I love the way he constructs the moments in the scene where like that reveal comes at a perfect time that he hurts women, and you realize that, oh, this guy's a monster too, and you're fucking over a monster, and he's going to make you pay for it. And then at the same time, his bodyguard, who has already warned Bradley Cooper that like if you do anything to this guy I'll kill you, like gets the news report coming in that the judge was dead. Like it all happens at the same time, and it's all simultaneous and tense, and it's going to boil over at the perfect time. I loved all that.
That's I'm not 100% sure in my read of the character, but like it's almost at a certain point, okay, so like for example, the psychiatrist Kate Blanchett says like all you care about is the money, and my thought when she said that was like, I don't agree with this character. I think that he just can't help himself. He sees an opportunity to have this kind of power over someone.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's not that the money is nice, but he had a lot of money. He could have cut and run kind of at any point, and he just kept escalating because he wanted to have the drama of this scene where he makes this guy think that he's brought his loved one back from the dead. That was just too juicy for him, and it really wasn't about the money.
Well, and I think it's partially he had a childhood where he was powerless, and this is a way that he can get power. You're right, but I also think it's a way that he can like fuck over powerful people as well. I think he enjoys that. I think he enjoys putting one over on people in power, like that. He on some level he enjoys knowing that he's getting away with tricking them. I think he really enjoys that too. I don't think it's the money at all. I mean, certainly he likes the money, but this is not a character that's doing anything for the money. I think the money is part of his desire for status, and that is a necessary thing to have status. But really, what he cares about is being high class. He wants to be better than other people. That's why he hides his accent. That's why he goes into this whole thing. That's what he wants to manipulate people into thinking he's a better, higher quality person than he actually is, because he's ashamed of his past. He's ashamed of that life. And of course, the movie is perfect because it puts him back, not just back where he came from, back to the carnival, but at the lowest totem pole of the carnival. The thing, a carnival, like, I don't think this movie is saying like carny people are bad people. There's certainly bad people in carny people, but all these other people were very kind and nice to each other. But the geek is like the one that is not even considered human by the carny people. So you're the pet of the carnies.
Yeah, I think that's right. I've only seen the movie once, so I can't call to mind the exact wording, but I think that the speech that his mentor gives him, where he's like that, there's this, he's saying this book is dangerous, referring to the little sort of notebook he has that contains all of the secrets of mentalism, which is a fantastic idea. Like, I just love this as an idea. The idea of, it's basically, pretend magic, but it's as dangerous as like a real magical grimoire. It's like, sure. Oh, well, but it has these secrets of the mind that give you power over others, and having power over others is dangerous to you because it warps you and it destroys you. And that was great. All that stuff is great. Like, that was my favorite idea from the whole thing.
Yeah, and I love how it gives you power over people, and that's dangerous. But the other danger is, because of this power, you begin to think you're more powerful than you are. I mean, the reason, like, Cate Blanchett almost literally tells him that she's going to fuck him over when, like, he brings over the money and says, "Can I just leave this here and then maybe you take half of it?" And she's like, "Why? You don't even know me. Why are you trusting me?" And he, like, confidently says, "Oh, I know you." And it's just like, no, you fucking moron. You don't actually.
Yeah, it's that's more of the self-destructive stuff, because he's like, yeah, you're bad just like me, and it's like, then why are you trusting her? Like, what? Yeah, what? Like you're, yeah. I don't,
because he can't help himself, because he's convinced of his greatness, and he's convinced that she's awed by his greatness. Like, I think everything of this entire relationship stems from the moment where she tried to trick him. She knew his game and tried to call him on it, and he beat her anyway by predicting that the gun was in the purse. And every bit of his view of that relationship comes from that moment where he's like, "See, you think you know my game, but I still have one over on you anyway." And that he convinces himself of that. And actually, the truth is, no, she's been fucking you over the whole time, and you just were too blinded to see it.
Yeah, if anything, that insult to her intelligence just made her be like, "Oh, I'm going to ruin this guy," very, very methodically. Yeah,
it is interesting to think about. So I have not seen the 47 version of this movie, but I did, read about it a little bit, and some of the changes they made, along with adding a lot more to it, where Bradley Cooper did not encounter this woman the way it happened in this version of the movie. He's just like feeling all messed up in the head because of everything that he's done in the past and the guilt he feels for the wood alcohol incident. And so he just goes to a shrink to talk about it. And then as he's getting to know this woman, as intrigued by this woman, that's when he starts to realize that she's recording all the things, and she has a lot of very powerful information that could be very useful in getting some over on people. And so they kind of go into business together that way. So I like this change, though. I like that she kind of comes into his life through detecting one of his methods of deception. It's a really effective whole dynamic. I think, their dynamic is the most noir part about this whole thing, and therefore it's my favorite part of the movie, unsurprisingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that part as well. I feel like that's the all of the intrigue surrounding that is great. This is working, by the way, Scott. The more we talk about it, you're making me like the movie more. I'm getting over it, because now you're making me think about the story and not think about the nauseating camera movement.
I'm telling you, man, it is. I'm utterly convinced it's one of those things that it's a once you notice it thing that it just ruins it for you.
Yeah. So just now I've looked up our former list of Del Toroisms, by the way, just to remind myself if we missed any. So the one element would be mazes, dark, stony, dark settings, and labyrinths, which there's sort of a bit of a horror maze when basically that I don't know what the word is, that haunted house sort of area of the carnival.
Yeah.
You could also call like the garden at the end of the movie.
What a Del Toro location for the final thing, right? Like this it's freezing cold out. There's snow on the ground, and it's this garden with like this mist over it, and then very, very Crimson Peaky, right? When she comes out in the white dress with the blood on her hands, I was like, I see what you're doing here.
Yeah,
what you're doing here, Del Toro.
I think like splashes of red in an otherwise like cold color palette is a Del Toro thing also.
Yeah, I mean, that's like Rooney Mara. I think, she's almost constantly in red in one way or another. And I think that's a very deliberate choice. What Del Toro was doing here is representing, she is life. She is hope. She is his ticket to a better place. And he only uses her as his ticket to worse and worse things,
Yeah. Their relationship is tragic because I even think like up until the accident with the wood alcohol, he might even be on sort of a positive track. Like you can see his life working and his life with her working. But then that is like an event that he's like, oh no, I've done it again. This is just who I am. I'm a monster who hurts people. And then that kind of begins this like self-hating spiral for him.
Yeah. I mean, he's good at the mentalism and he's good at the showmanship stuff too. Like for much as I think his change to Rooney Mara's set is just adding deception to a trick that doesn't have a lot of deception in it. It's a good idea, and it's very showy, and it's certainly going to impress a lot of people. Like I agree. He would have had a lot of success had he just stayed at the carnival, but in his mind, just like being the geek at the end, it's only temporary, right? Like the carny part was only temporary. He wanted more. He wanted, and again, not money. I think money's a part of it, certainly, but what he wants is the status. What he wants is to be able to, like he brags at the end, like sold out 2 shows a week or 2 shows a night. That's what he wants. He wants all eyes on him, and he wants to be getting one over on people while they're looking right at him. And he loves that. And it destroys him.
Other thing from the list is either child protagonist or prominent child character, which is one of the rare instances where that's totally missing.
Well, I mean, we got the baby in a jar, so that's
the baby in a jar.
Yeah,
it's the thing we're looking at over the credits. Little Enoch.
That's so creepy.
And then we've talked about all of the others except for the idea of misfits within an oppressive system, which
carnies is literally that.
still 100%. Yeah. The carnies and just who he is as a character as well. So
yeah, definitely.
So most of the normal Del Toroisms are present. Bugs are missing. And there's that's funny. I was going to say, I almost missed one because I was going to say there's no monsters, but no, they managed to the baby is basically a Del Toro monster as far as that goes.
Well, and it's like one thing we've said about the Del Toroism with monsters is that the monsters in the movie are almost never the actual monsters of the movie, right? Like Shape of Water, I think, did this most directly, where the good guy is the monster, the bad guy is the human. And I think this is a movie that doesn't have any quote unquote real monsters in it, but once again, it is people that are the biggest monsters. So.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's talk about the baby, right? Because as a symbol, it's absolutely perfect. It's a poor child who had the horrible misfortune of being basically born unable to survive and killing his own mother through no fault of his own, due to fate, you could say. I mean, like nothing else can be blamed, right? It's just fate and misfortune, and then he ends up being this object of disgust and ridicule, and there but for the grace of God go I, which is sort of what the geek is in a way, and what Bradley Cooper ends up being as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, I've never I think because when I saw the baby in the bottle, like my first reaction was, oh, that's creepy. That's like deliciously creepy. I love it. But when you think about it, it's actually, it's monstrous to do that. Like to take the corpse of a human child that has died in childbirth and to preserve it in a bottle so people can be like, ooh, isn't that weird? That's fucked up. And I mean, that is as equally fucked up as doing something like The Geek is. You're absolutely right. And
I mean, just to say it out, like, it doesn't occur to you when you're watching the movie necessarily, like, the child should be buried.
Yeah.
It's a human. It's a person.
It's a person.
And it was, he even goes out of his way to say, like, the thing just cried for days and then died. So it's like, okay, it just had a horrible, miserable life upon this earth and then died, and now you put it in a jar to show it around. It's
so people paid 10 cents to go, ew. Yeah. God, what a fucked up thing. Yeah. And I mean, that's the whole thing, right? The whole thing is putting people's pain on display. Like that's the whole thing they say is like, don't turn it into a spook show, right? This is not supposed to be a spook show. This is supposed to be like, you impress people with your ability to fakely know something about them that they didn't know you knew. But the line that is drawn that Bradley Cooper crosses is the idea you turn that into manipulating their pain for entertainment. And that is absolutely what he starts doing. That's the spook show part of it. And that's the part where we're very explicitly said that only ends up in destruction. And the movie very specifically says that the excuse he has, which is the judge and his wife, is like, look, I saved their marriage. I brought them together. Look what I did. I did this good thing. Actually, what I'm doing here is good because I'm providing people closure. And the movie's like, no, that's bullshit. Actually, what you did is you literally destroyed these people because the woman does a murder-suicide thinking they could go be with their son that you just said, I can't wait to be with you again. Like the game you're playing here is just as bad as, making an alcoholic high on opiates and throwing him in a pit and telling him to eat these chickens and I'll keep feeding you booze. Like it's the same thing. And so he can, raise a moral stink about the geek thing, but he's doing a similar thing with these people. And he thinks it's okay because he's a monster. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all it's really, this is the good stuff. This is the really good stuff about Del Toro is every single one of these movies we end up talking about how just tightly woven together the themes are with just every single choice on every level. And that continues to be true here.
I do think one of the complaints we have had in the past is his scripting and the stories. The themes are very tightly woven. I think the stories are not as tight. And you might not agree with this, but I do think this movie is one of the better, tighter scripts that I've seen. And maybe that comes from the fact that he's adapting not only an existing movie, but an existing movie that had an existing novel that it was based on. And so you have a lot of help with the overall structure of that story. I don't know.
I think that structurally it does work better. Yeah, my only complaints about the writing were like a few scenes where I would be like, the context of the actual scene seemed a bit contrived. Like why are these people meeting and talking? And it was minor. It was always minor.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of one specifically? I'm curious.
Not super specific, but there would be moments when he'd be talking to the Carney director, Willem Dafoe. He'd be talking to Willem Dafoe, and Willem Dafoe would be explaining things where I was just like, why is he explaining this? Like, he doesn't need to know this. The most I could think was like, well, I guess he's a character who likes to brag and likes to show off and likes to be the big man who knows everything.
Yeah.
But there were a few instances like that where I was like, this is obviously just an info dump functionally.
Yeah.
And we're just putting these words in this character's mouth, which is not the greatest sin in the world from a writing point of view. But I did sort of like, notice it.
I mean, you clocked it like Willem Dafoe clocked him getting a free view of the geek.
Clocked you.
I love Willem Dafoe, man. He's so good. I wish he was in this movie more, actually.
Yeah, that was my, like, at a certain point, it's really obvious. You're like, oh, we're moving away from Willem Dafoe and Tony Collette, the best actors in the world. God,
yeah.
what are we going to replace them with? Oh, Kate Blanchett. Okay, all right.
Yeah, then Kate Blanchett. I mean, I guess if I had to pick like a weakest link of this movie, I would probably pick Rooney Mara. And I don't think it's the actress's fault. I kind of think the character is a little underwritten. Like, there's just not a whole lot for her to do other than like be the concerned, abused girlfriend of the monster, you know? Like, because so much of the focus in the movie is on Bradley Cooper and on Kate Blanchett's character, I think Rooney Mara just does a good job with what she has, but I do think it's kind of just an underwritten character.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is there were some changes in the story. Like, I read that because this movie originally in 1947 came out during the Hays Code, the Hays Code was a Hollywood, code of ethics that movies had to follow. And it wasn't just like, no nudity, no killing type things. It had moral requirements, as if like the bad guy can't get away with it. The good guys have to win. You should strive to have a happy ending. So one thing that happens in the 1947 version of this, Matt, is when he becomes the geek at the carnival, Molly, the Rooney Mara character, is actually working at that same carnival, and they reconnect, and there's hope given to both of the characters there, as if like they have a chance again, and it's kind of using them to compare and contrast with the Pete and I forget what Toni Collette's character's name is, but that relationship between those two older people that have been in the carnival for a long time and are very in love. And again, I haven't seen the 47 movie, but that feels so out of place to me that if you tack that ending onto this movie, this version of the story, I'm just like, what have you done? No, I don't want to see hope for Bradley Cooper. Like, he's a monster.
Yeah.
And this is a fitting ending for him.
Maybe if we'd leaned less into his monstrosity,
sure,
then that would have worked. But as it is, this is just a totally perfect ending. Really, like that. Like, it really was an amazing ending.
Him cackling madly, saying it was the role I was, or it was the thing I was born to do.
I was born for. Yeah, and
oh my god,
like that's the best thing about this character is he's just enough of a monster to do these things, and just enough of a human to realize what a monster he's become.
Yep.
And that's what makes the realization at the end where he's basically like, this is exactly what I deserve.
Yep. This is where I was heading the entire time.
Yeah.
I do wonder if one of the reasons to get really cynical about it, one of the reasons Willem Dafoe, took an interest to him in the first place was like, ooh, is this geek potential here? This is some random guy shows up. This could be geek potential.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I imagine he's sizing everybody up for using them in one way or another. That's but he does end up telling him the secret.
But, I think he probably realizes pretty quickly that this is a guy that doesn't drink at
Mhm.
the time. He not. I do love the Kate Blanchett, like the Kate Blanchett psychotherapy scene is so good, where she's just getting to the core at him and like is like, there's that word again, never. We'll have to work on that.
Uh-huh.
It's so good, man. This is why I love film noir. Like, I think out of any of the performances here, Kate Blanchett knows exactly what movie she's in,
Yeah.
and is really loving that femme fatale noir type role. She's eating it up. I love her so much. God,
Yeah.
she's a good actress.
Yeah. I agree. A lot of great performances.
Great. So best movie ever is what you're saying. You fully convert. I love it. I'm just kidding. I like, here's the thing is I totally understand why this movie didn't work on you in the moment. I totally get it, because there were moments myself where I was like, midway through the movie, I was like, I don't know. I'm feeling pretty mixed about this one. I think for me, it came together in such a delicious way by the end that it made everything worth it for me.
Yeah. So I have my, it's funny. So I'm looking back at our rankings from when we did this before.
And I believe when we did this before, we hadn't yet decided to do the universal Doof Media rankings. We did our own independent rankings. Is that correct?
That seems to be correct based on what's in our notes here. And so mine is different from yours. Mine has, so I'm just going to say, I feel like mine would put this movie actually not too low, maybe around the level of, man, my ranking makes no sense at all. I was going to say around the level of Devil's Backbone, which is a movie that I liked a lot, actually.
Yeah.
So pretty high up in the ranking, all things considered.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm frantically getting to the page to try to see where mine was.
It's in the Shape of Water notes.
Yeah. And to see, to remind myself what were all Guillermo del Toro's movies.
Yeah, I think I think I might like it roughly on par with Crimson Peak or Devil's Backbone, or somewhere in that range.
So looking at my list, I had my midpoint is Pacific Rim. I had Pacific Rim as number 5, and it's definitely better than that in my mind. Although that's a movie I liked quite a bit, but yeah, I'd put this at Crimson Peak or Devil's Backbone. I think I agree with you.
Roughly on par with those, I would say.
Yeah. So I would put it around, in the top 5 of Del Toro for sure. I mean, we said after we finished Shape of Water, we were both really excited to see what this guy was going to do next, and I think this is a really interesting project for him to do. I'm very glad he did it, and I think we're going to be seeing more. I was about to say more typical Del Toro stuff after this, but this is in many ways, as you pointed out, very typical Del Toro stuff. He's just doing it in a different genre, but he's bringing all his stuff to it.
Yeah, and it's funny now. I'm remembering how much I liked Devil's Backbone and how that movie also has a baby in a jar.
Yeah, it does.
So that's definitely another Del Toroism.
And of course we have to say that later this year, a movie by Guillermo del Toro is coming out as well. A version of Pinocchio done in stop motion animation. Holy shit! That is. It's like it was made specifically for me. It also stars Kate Blanchett. So yeah, I cannot wait for this movie. I'm so excited about it. I think it's going right to Netflix.
It's going to be a visual treat no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, like, they released a little teaser trailer of it on Twitter not too long ago, and it's just the Jiminy Cricket character talking about how, I knew this guy named Pinocchio, but it's such it's not the Disney version of Jiminy Cricket at all. It's just this mean old cricket man stop motion puppet thing. It's just I'm so excited about what this thing's gonna look like, because
Awesome.
Pinocchio can be scary, man. Like the I forget what it's called, but when they start turning into donkeys. When I was little, that scared the shit out of me. I don't want to turn into a donkey.
Yeah, it's one of those dark fairy tale type things.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So we'll have to maybe go back to Guillermo at the end of next year.
Sounds
good. This year, yeah. All right, so that is Nightmare Alley. We want to know from you folks: did you watch this movie, and what do you think of it? I think, Matt, this is actually we're going to see a lot more people watching this movie. This movie did not do very well in the theater, but it just came out on both HBO Max and Hulu, both somehow. I'm still not sure how that works because one is owned by Disney and the other is owned by AT&T, and those are not the same company. I think there's probably some weird movie stuff is so confusing. Yeah. But the point is that for some reason this gets to be on both services, so a lot of people are going to be watching it. Just nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be one of those movies that people are going to maybe give a chance now that it's freely available on streaming. So
yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, but Best Picture, huh? All right.
We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, though, we do have to circle back around to our Doof Canon episode on the Grand Budapest Hotel we did a couple weeks ago. Just to remind everyone, both Matt and I loved the hell out of this movie. Probably one of my favorite movies I've talked about in a while. Just absolutely loved it. So we gave it 2 very enthusiastic yeses for being in the canon. But what did the audience do, Matt? What did they do? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I'm going to guess 90% positive.
Oh, you were off. It is 95% yeses. Only 5% of people said no to this, which is fine. Yeah, a lot of people love this movie. Unsurprising. There are a lot of people that are mixed on Wes Anderson, but for whatever reason, even the people that don't really love Wes Anderson tend to love this movie a lot. So that very positive reaction. Happy to have the Grand Budapest Hotel in our canon. We did get one comment from Chris, who said we didn't talk about it on the show, but one thing they really liked was the music. The music of this movie. I agree. I tend to not talk about music on this podcast because I don't know anything about it, and so I don't want to sound like an idiot. And also, the best music for me is the music that works on me without me even being aware of it. So I don't tend to be like, yes, the music was very good in this. But I after I saw this comment, I went and pulled up the score of this movie, and the music is quite good. I like it a lot.
Yeah, there's just so much happening all the time that you don't have the bandwidth to actually pay attention to the music usually. And yeah. It's funny, I usually do notice music, but I didn't for this movie. So I'll go check that out. Thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah, definitely. So welcome to the canon of greatest films of all time, the Grand Budapest Hotel. You're among great company that I don't remember because I lost that sheet that I made that had all the movies in it. It's gone. So
but you've actually bothered to make it and now it's just lost.
It's on Google Drive somewhere. I just don't know where. I don't know what file I would have saved that in. So who knows? It's somewhere. I'll try to do a search later.
I just searched for it. I can't find it.
Where did it go? I definitely made it. It definitely was made. I'm never gonna win. No. Doof. Okay, Matt, I want to talk to you about the Academy Awards. So, we used to cover the Oscars a little bit more extensively on the show in the past. We kind of stopped doing that, mostly because those conversations just tended to be me talking and you going, okay, because you hadn't seen so many of the movies.
Right.
And now, I think we kind of slowed down on that, and especially even more so now because with my current situation, I've seen very few of the movies that are nominated as well. But I think we can have a broad conversation about the Oscars and what they mean in the year 2022, because I think, in my opinion, the answer is they don't mean a whole lot anymore. Yeah. I was going through, we were talking about TV ratings a couple weeks ago, and I was going through and looking at TV ratings for previous years. And one of the things I noticed that was, of course, we said a couple weeks ago that NCIS is the most watched show. Definitely true. But what we didn't say was after all the football. If you look at a list of the top 20 most watched television events of the year, the first 15 are going to be football games, with the Super Bowl, of course, leading the way. What I didn't say was that 10, 15 years ago, number 16 was the Academy Awards. This was actually a very big deal. It was a show that a lot of people watched. It was the center of movie culture in a time where movie culture was one of the most important cultures that existed in the United States. And that is not true anymore. Last year, the Oscars was the lowest it's been watched in decades. Less than 9 million people tuned in to the award show, which is very, very bad. And I think the interesting thing about this is the Academy Awards basically has two options. They can try to nominate a bunch of huge movies and win people back and be like, look, Spider-Man for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you all want to watch the award show again? Don't you care about the Academy Awards again? Or they can just embrace the fact that they're just going to be a niche film bro type award show now that is going to serve a similar function that modern day criticism does, which is attempt to highlight little known things that not a lot of people have seen. And with the nominations that came out on Tuesday, it appears that they're going with the latter. They are there's a lot of movies on here. There's some that are very typical Oscar bait movies, but there's a lot of movies on here that are small movies. There's a 3-hour Japanese film called Drive My Car that was nominated for Best Picture that almost no one has seen because it's playing in, I think, just LA and New York, and that's it right now. There's nowhere else to see it. I've heard very, very good things, and I'm sure it's a great movie, but it is not what you would have typically called Oscar bait. Like, they usually shy away from the foreign films, except for in that one category that they put them in. But recently they haven't been doing that. And so I guess my question to you is, do you think that's the right decision to just lean in to the nicheness of it?
I think they sort of have to do that because I don't think they'd succeed going the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't think they'd succeed if they said, we're gonna nominate all of the Star Wars and Marvel movies for every category and try to draw people back that way, because I don't think people would be drawn back. I think that the world has moved on. The dynamics have changed. It used to be that movies were the center of culture in a big way because they were the biggest and best thing that there was to do. Mm-hmm. A normal date was a date to go see a movie, at the theater. And honestly, I don't know what dating culture looks like anymore, but I bet it's different.
I have no idea.
Because the thing is, when we were younger, there wasn't infinity entertainment all the time everywhere. And so what is the value of a movie in this competitive environment of entertainment? I think the value of a film is just much lower. And I just don't care as much. I mean, we care more than the average person. And even I probably care much less than I used to care, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah. I mean, I do too. Like, I have watched the Oscars every year for basically my entire life. I don't remember a year in which we weren't watching the Academy Awards. And I will continue to watch this award show until I die, probably. Mm-hmm. But who wins has never been the less important to me than it is right now. I don't. Now, I am excited about the nominations because I'm A, it gives me some movies on my radar that I still haven't seen. B, I just like to see good work honored. It's just good. But I think that the thing we have to do here is break apart the Academy Awards as awards and the Academy Awards as an awards show. Mm-hmm. Because I think Academy Award nominated, Academy Award winning as a thing you can put on your movie still has weight.
Yeah.
I think if you open up your HBO Max right now, the fact that HBO Max can put Academy nominated Best Picture Nightmare Alley on your home screen will get people to click play on that movie that would not have clicked play otherwise. Yeah. Because they'll say, oh, Best Pick. Okay, I'll try that out.
Yeah.
But the actual telecast has never mattered less than it does right now.
Yeah, absolutely, because they still serve a vital function of curation. Mm-hmm. And I think they've done a good job at that. I don't remember when the last time I did this was, but every once in a while I look at, the best picture winners, the best actor winners over time. And, it's basically a solid list of really good movies. And you're like, yeah sure. That scans, mm-hmm. and that's, as long as that remains the case, it's still a valuable thing that they're doing. But I agree with the other part of what you said, which is, well, I mean, I don't even know how to watch it live. I never watch anything live. I don't remember when the last time No, the last time I watched anything live was probably a space launch that I watched on YouTube by just finding the live stream on YouTube, which is not what anyone means when they say watching something live on television.
Yeah, that a valid point. We struggled with this last year as well. My parents fortunately got YouTube TV at about the exact same time the Academy Awards were going to start, and we used their YouTube TV account to watch live TV because we don't have cable either. I use my parents' YouTube TV when I want to watch football games or basketball games or stuff like the Academy Awards. But a lot of people don't have those things, and believe me, when I was struggling to try to find it, the Oscars are not available to stream on YouTube or anything like that. And I do think that is something that the Academy is going to have to deal with. Like, I understand why it's restricted so heavily, because I think it's ABC paid a metric shit ton of money to get the rights to stream those things or to broadcast those things. And so obviously they want to control that as much as possible. But I think eventually those deals are going to expire. And I think the Academy needs to look at modernizing in that they need to make them more readily available in more places. Mm-hmm. I also think the most important comparison here is the Game Awards. Which, bear with me here, I think this is the Jeff Keighley hosted video game award show that happens every year that is fairly popular within the video game community, although true to the video game community, they both like it and like to make fun of it in equal measure. But what the Game Awards has done is recognize that nobody actually gives a shit about awards. And so, like, between every award, they have some kind of world premiere trailer of a game that no one has ever seen before. And so they make themselves important by being a place to get news, not just to say, yay, this was the best game, I was right in liking it, but to actually provide new information and news. And that's why people tune into the stream of the Game Awards. I don't think the Academy Awards can do something like that, nor do I think they would want to. But I wonder, 20 years from now, is the Academy Awards going to be broadcasted? Like, is that going to be a thing that's necessary? Or is it going to be like the Golden Globes did this year, where it was just a tweet thread that they announced everything in? That's for more complicated reasons than that. It's because the television channel like dropped them because there's a lot of controversies within the Golden Globes. The Golden Globes have always been awards that you can just buy. You can just give the Hollywood Foreign Press a lot of money and gifts and stuff, and they'll vote for your thing. And then everyone decided last year that was a really big problem all of a sudden. And we didn't like that, but it's been true for decades. So the Golden Globes are persona non grata right now. But it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, does the method of delivery of these things, do we need a big elaborate 3-hour award show with hosts and music? And like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. At some point it stops paying for itself. I don't know when that point is.
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing about the Academy is I don't think they care about money. I think they've kind of positioned themselves. First of all, they have oodles of grant money coming in. Grant money might be the wrong word. They have lots of very rich people support the Academy very, very well. When you have an organization that's made up of rich, famous people, you're usually doing okay for money. I really think they're positioning themselves as just being like the place for movie history and movie knowledge and awareness and curation, as you said. Like, one of the big things they've done in the past few years is they built this giant Hollywood museum in Los Angeles, and it's like this huge like history of Hollywood and history of American film and of the Academy and all the awards it's given out. And I really feel like that's the lane that they need to really dive down, because I agree with you. I don't think nominating Spider-Man for Best Picture is going to make a bunch of people tune into the Academy Awards. I think it's going to make a bunch of people go, "Oh, good, finally a movie that I care about." But they're not going to watch.
No.
Like,
well, just think about me. Like, Dune, I think, has 10 Oscar nominations in different categories, and I care about Dune more than anybody cares about any movie, and I still don't really care whether it wins the whether it wins the awards. The awards, I'm just like, yeah, I already know it's good.
yeah.
I mean, I guess it'll make me, slightly happier for Villeneuve that it's like, oh yeah, good, people recognize it.
But you shouldn't feel good for Villeneuve because he got screwed.
He got screwed because he didn't get nominated. But if his movie wins a whole bunch of awards, then
I did hear this very elaborate conspiracy theory that they're Peter Jacksoning him, where they know that this movie is going to have a second part, and so they're just waiting for part 2 to honor him with the director nomination.
Yeah, sure, we'll go with that.
I think the funny part about conversations like this is we're talking about the Academy as if it's a cohesive unit that makes broad decisions together in cooperation with each other. And that is just not what it is, right? Like the way that these nominations are done is by voting amongst the different segments. So, it is the director's wing of the Academy Awards that decides who's nominated for director. So they are not like all getting together. It's not a cabal of the I don't know how many members of the Academy there are, as now they've been letting a bunch more in recently to fix their diversity problem. But it's not like they're all deciding collectively to vote on things. It's just people voting their own self-interest or what they liked or what they want. But it does create a trend, and the trend seems to be moving towards. Frankly, this is a very film Twittery group of nominations this year. Mm-hmm. This is very much in line with the movies that Film Twitter feels should be the top 10 best films of the year.
That was my impression as well.
Yeah. Which is not a bad thing. It is just a lens. It is a lens on this whole thing. And yeah, I agree. I think one of the most important things in my life of film was getting to the point where I realized that I don't actually care if my favorite movie wins any awards, because it's still my favorite movie. And I think it takes a while to get there, because you feel like people are constantly worried that they like a thing that nobody else likes, and that singles them out. But that's okay. That's okay.
I have a little bit of a hypothesis, actually. My hypothesis is the slate is put together by basically Twitter. Basically, who can curry the most sort of buzz, which is going to be dominated by these sorts of dynamics that you see on social media. But who wins is determined by the voting, and the voting is from this block of elderly Hollywood people.
Yeah.
So it's just an interest. Maybe this doesn't even qualify as a hypothesis, but it's just an interesting observation that you end up with a slate of films that are quite artsy, but then the actual voting is done by people who are not necessarily of the same ilk as those who actually were responsible for the nominations, if that makes sense.
Sure. And I will say, there is still a lot of politicking that goes on here. There's a lot of campaigning. Companies spend millions of dollars in campaigning for these awards. Mm-hmm. They do meet and greets, and they bring if they like. I think one of the stories I heard this week was this idea that, like, I think when Eddie Redmayne won for I believe it was The Danish Girl last, they were spending all kinds of money flying him to every meet and greet. And Eddie Redmayne, as a human being, is just like a really nice, friendly guy who plays very well in those kind of environments, who is the right amount of, playing the game, as in trying to convince people like why his performance is the best, but being, not too arrogant and pushy about it to the point where people are just like, oh, he's just a good old guy.
He's so likable.
Yeah, and then he won the award. And I think that is a lot of it, because this year Lady Gaga was doing a lot of campaigning to get nominated for her role in God, what is the name of the movie that came out today? The Ridley Scott one. Not today.
I didn't know Lady Gaga was in that. You're talking about The Duel? Duel?
Dude, no. Ridley Scott had 2 movies that came out this year, Matt. He's a baller. House of Gucci is the one I was thinking of.
Oh, God.
So Lady Gaga was pushing very, very hard to get nominated in this role. And from what I understand, that actually had a negative effect, because, well, I mean, it's actors who vote for this thing, and actors are petty assholes sometimes, and she pissed them off with how hard she was campaigning. And so there's a lot of politics in this. And so it is disingenuous to say there's any kind of uniform decision making on the fate or the role of the Academy in film in the world of film.
It's funny because at this point, putting a certified fresh sticker on your movie is, I feel like that would have been laughable like 20 years ago, and now it's just like, yeah, I get it. A lot of critics liked your movie. That means a lot. That means probably about as much as Academy Award nominated.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. Like, there's this really fascinating thing happening where actual film criticism, and by film criticism, I mean similar to what we do and similar, like long form, like really analyzing and dissecting movies, has never been less relevant than it is right now. But there's so many things right now. There's so much entertainment out there that having some sort of curation system, whether it be Rotten Tomatoes or the Academy Awards, to just like shrink the population for people a little bit, to just give them a cursory glance at what are the things worth spending my time on and what are the things absolutely not worth spending my time on. That has never been more important right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
So where does that leave the Academy Awards? I don't know. I'm going to watch it. Yeah. I hope The Power of the Dog wins for Best Picture, because that's one of my favorite movies of last year. But that's all I got. That's it.
All right. Yep. They're just going to continue to dwindle in relevance. And
that is very true.
And the Doof canon is going to continue to grow in relevance until at some point in the future, the two will cross.
Yeah. And then we will have the Millions Academy.
Yep. Exactly.
And then we'll get in trouble for our voting block, because they're not. I mean, all 30 of them are not.
Now, notice I didn't say that the point at which they cross will be at a high point.
Oh, no. No. All right, folks, that is all we have for you this week. If you have any opinions on the Grand Budapest Hotel, on the Academy Awards, or of course on our main segment review of the week, Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on our Twitter account at doofmedia, or on the subreddit that's r/doofmedia. Matt, we actually had a comment on our last week's episode. Someone asked us what we mean by a story's conceit and what we mean by a story beat or a plot beat, these buzzwords that we use and we assume that everyone knows what they mean. You care to give a cursory explanation of what these things actually mean?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for putting me on the spot, buddy.
No problem, man. That's what I live for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conceit of the story in my mind is sort of the thing about the story that you have to accept to move on.
Yes,
it's sort of like the premise. It's that thing about the movie which defines it as this is what we're doing here, and which is why you'll hear people say, like, it's not fair to criticize that because that's the conceit of the film. It's like you sort of have to grant it. It's like, not being able to get over the fact that they have artificial gravity in Star Trek or something. It's like, it's just part of the setting. It's a conceit of the world.
Yes.
That's how I use that term. It may not even be technically exactly right, but that's the way I use it.
I mean, it's words. They're all made up anyway.
Yeah.
And as far as what a beat is, a story beat or a plot beat, it's just like, if you want to talk about a certain thing that happens, but it's not in books, it's not a chapter or a page. In films, it's not a specific scene. It's an element of the scene. It's just an individual isolated element of a story. That's really it. It doesn't have a real, like, strict definitional meaning to it. It's just like the beat where why can't I? Bradley Cooper punched some guy in the nose so hard that his face collapsed in upon itself. That was that story beat.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason why it is a term comes from the idea that you are keeping a rhythm of storytelling, and you want to be kind of steadily doling out these beats of story, and not too quickly, not too slowly, not with too many gaps, and that's just one sense in which it's useful. It's also just like, it's a discrete sort of like moment of story.
That's you're right that it comes from literal musical, the beats of and rhythm of music or poetry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that. on with the outro. Sorry, Matt. I just remembered that as we were going into this thing, and I as I ask people to reach out to us, I need to remember to respond to them. That's usually a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for the question. I mean, we get caught up in our own thing sometimes.
yeah, we hoist ourselves by our own petard. Hey, is there any way to use that phrase correctly? Because I don't think I've ever used it correctly in my entire life, including that one, right?
I mean, that was close enough as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. But yeah, if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, then we encourage you to go click that button and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find the Doofcast on all the major podcasting platforms.
That is correct. Sorry, I was on a different tab. Busted. You can find this on all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. And of course, if you like what we do here and want to support us or any of the Doof Media podcasts, you can become a patron of Doof Media at patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate at any of our available levels, and there's some cool bonus content for you, whether it be extra podcasts, voting power in things like which movies are nominated for the Doof Canon and which books are covered in our book club, that kind of stuff. Bunch of fun stuff. More coming every week. So please check it out. Patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, we really do put a lot of cool stuff over there.
Yeah, definitely.
Please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, because each review really does help us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content we make here, and also just makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Yeah. As we said, curation is more important than has ever been done before. And so you can help curate everyone's list of good podcasts by giving us 5 stars.
That's right.
That works somehow. It just works. It works.
I mean, criticism is more important than film, and curation of criticism is more important than criticism. So you're really the most important link in this chain.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We are the second most important thing on the planet.
Yeah.
You, listener, are the most.
That's exactly right.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for us this week. Next week, we are taking a look at Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch. Finally, Matt, we're both going to watch this movie by a director we both say is a day one viewing for us. We're finally going to do it months and months later. So tune in next week for The French Dispatch. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.